Okay. Namaste, Devya Sajno, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Sound Home Podcast. With me, like always, is my highly skilled, trained professional co-host, Mr. Parth. And today we have a really special guest all the way from Denmark. We've got Mr. Stephen Brown, who's a musician, a full-time musician, and has been doing some amazing work. He's put out a song called Amygdala. I hope I'm spelling that right, Stephen, which is
Yep.
basically an R&B track with some wonderful production that I've heard. And we're going to be talking to Stephen more about his processes, his influences, his journey as a musician, what he plans on doing moving forward. So, Stephen, how's it going, man? So good to have you here.
Thank you so much, man. It's going great, and thank you so much for having me on this podcast.
Pleasure's all
It's
ours,
great,
man. Pleasure.
great to be here.
We're glad, man. We're glad. So, Stephen, for starters, just tell us, how did you sort of foray into music? How did you venture into music? What was like the instigating factor for you?
So I actually, relatively to a lot of other people, started kind of late.
Okay.
I began playing guitar when I was around 16 years old, 16,
Okay.
17 years old.
Right.
I got into playing guitar because my my dad had an old guitar lying around, which
Okay.
nobody had talked about. And I
Right.
basically, suddenly I knew about it, like my mom told me about it. And then
Okay.
I was allowed to inherit it.
Hmm.
And then it was just like this old Yamaha, Spanish classical nylon string guitar.
Right.
The strings were all like rusty and like basically broken. I had to
Okay.
like refurbish the whole thing. So it
Right.
was like a difficult start, but that's kind of what got me into it. I just started like
Oh,
teaching myself to play guitar,
right.
kind of like thought, um, always wanted to like sing along to it as well. So I started doing that and
Hmm.
got very into it, started playing to my family and they
Hmm.
were, they supported me. And then I went to like high school with like a major in music.
Hmm.
And then, you know,
Hmm.
after that, I started like writing my own stuff and, you
Right.
know, several years later, I guess here we are.
Wow, man, that's a really fascinating sort of anecdote you shared. You started at the age of 16. I'm saying that's old, but I think that's pretty young for anybody to sort of
Yeah,
start at. I
yeah.
mean, it's about the inclination and the grasp. So were you? Of course, like you had this inclination towards music. How long did it sort of take for you to sort of grasp music to a point where you felt that you were comfortable with playing instruments and doing your own thing with it? How long was that
Oh,
sort of journey for you?
like a long time for sure. Like
Right,
especially
right.
since I was like self-taught.
Ah,
A lot of the time was spent, fiddling around with like just basic chords,
right.
trying to like figure out very basic stuff just so I could start, get going. I
Absolutely.
would say the point where things really started to take off was when I like majored in music in high school because I started
Right.
learning some music theory
Uh-huh.
and I got like a bigger grasp of like how everything kind of like went together, which chords went
Right.
with what.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I would say that was around that time that I kind of, started
Hmm.
out pretty rusty, but like by the end of high school, I felt like I kind of figured things out, kind of.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. You're just being modest, but that's great, man. That's great. Tell me about this. We've already spoken about the fact that you started as a musician at the age of 16, and you took your own time. Who were the people who sort of influenced you to sort of take up music? Were the people around you
Well,
that you really sort of vibed with in terms of musicality, or were the people that you looked up to who were like established artists that you sort of, or was it like a mix of both? What was it like for you?
Definitely a mix of both, I'd say.
Right.
I had a very close friend who also started playing guitar and singing around the same time that I did.
mhm.
Okay.
Um, and that kind of turned into like, a semi competition between the two of us of like who could, progress faster in like guitar playing and singing. And then
Right.
we were both really inspired by John Mayer. So it was
Mhm.
Oh,
always like
absolutely.
who learned the like new John Mayer songs the fastest and stuff
Right.
like that.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Did you try learning the guitar, the chords of Neon by John Mayer?
Yeah, but like that, I
That's
learned
the most
that
difficult.
like
That's the most difficult one, right? That's like regarded as one of the most difficult sort of guitar pieces.
it's it's definitely the most famous one of like
Mhm.
being like the hardest one.
Right, right, absolutely,
Um,
absolutely.
I learned it like at a very late age because I remember looking at it or like listening to it when I was like
Yeah, yeah.
16, 17, and I was like, man, I want to do that one day.
Right, right, right.
And
Absolutely.
and
Yeah,
then eventually after like a lot of years, I
yeah.
think I learned it like when I was like 20 or something. I was just like, now I feel
And
like I
right, right. So how long did it sort of take to you to sort of get used to it? Because I've heard a lot of people who take like weeks or months to sort of once they start learning it. How much time did it take you
oh
to
man,
learn the chords once you started
that's
learning?
that's a good question. So like the chords are no problem. They're
Mhm.
basically, it's a weird tuning like on the guitar. You tune like the low E string down to a C. And
Mm,
then the chords are pretty, if you've already played a lot of John Mayer
mm,
songs, the
Mhm.
chords will kind of make sense.
right,
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 Um,
absolutely.
right,
so the hardest thing was like for sure, the picking pattern that took me like I
Right.
think at least a couple of weeks before I learned
What do you
that.
say? Right, right. Wow, man, that's like dedication, man. That's great. That's great. So, what are like speaking about like Neon by John Mayer? Are there? Of course, like, I'm sure that there are other sort of like you have all the Eddie Van Halen stuff, and then you have like all these Jimi Hendrix and all these people, these great guitarists. And are there sort of any other sort of musicians whose pieces, I mean, in terms of like instrument pieces that have really sort of appeal to you, and you sort of try to emulate in your own way?
Yeah, for sure. Like I'd say a lot of my guitar playing is from, obviously John Mayer,
Mm,
which is like he also got me into like Jimi Hendrix, like
Mhm.
that
right,
blues sort of thing with BB King too. Like I learned that
Right,
he has like a weird pyramid form like on the guitar that he likes to get into.
right.
Um, and then I'd say like uh musician who's mostly known on like Instagram or YouTube. He's called like Matteo Sasato. I hope I pronounced his name correctly. But he's like a crazy skilled guitarist. I learned a lot of like technique from that guy.
Mhm.
Mm,
Um, and when it comes to like writing stuff,
mm,
uh, I'm really inspired by it, because the thing that I actually try to aim for with like my
mm,
sound when it comes to
mm,
creating songs is definitely the R&B genre, like somewhere
right,
in that vicinity. I
right.
try to put like new twists and turns into it, but like,
Mhm.
you know,
Mm,
somewhere around that vicinity. So like Frank Ocean inspires me a lot. Herb,
Right,
Daniel Caesar,
mm.
um, some of the old school ones like Usher and Neo and stuff.
Oh
it
yeah,
might not come it might not come across very clearly in
right, right.
my
There's a little bit of
songs, but
subtlety to it. There's a little bit of subtlety to it, is what you're saying, right? It's not like it's not direct. The
ex-
referencing that you're sort of trying to do is not direct. I mean,
exactly.
I could feel that in Amygdala also because I once I mean I was even talking to Akshit about this. I love the production of it so much. I felt that
yeah,
the vocals and the production blend in so beautifully in that song. Uh,
Thank you.
Tell me about like how did Amygdala come to be and what was like your whole songwriting process, and after that if you could just generally tell us what is like your songwriting process.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
yeah, man.
So Amygdala kind of came about from me fiddling around with I had just gotten a new MIDI keyboard,
Mhm.
Okay.
um, which I used because like I basically make everything myself. Like
Right.
I record everything, I
Hmm.
produce everything,
Hmm.
and I mix and master it.
Right.
Um, so like the process behind Amygdala was that I was playing around with my new MIDI keyboard.
Hmm.
I kind of had like in mind something called like a 2-5-1 chord progression, which is a very
Okay.
chord like common chord progression in jazz.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Um, so like I kind of wanted to do that, but like again, kind of like add my own kind of twist to the chord progression, and that's how like the sound came from. So it was just like me playing my keyboard. And
Hmm.
then after that, I added some drums to give like this sort of, and then I added like the bass line. And
Right.
from there
Right.
on, I was like, I need to write something on, because that was when I kind of knew that I was like, okay, this is
Hmm.
not just going to be one of those weird projects you're gonna like
Hmm.
end up scrapping. I was like,
Right.
this actually feels like it has some potential. And then
Yeah.
I just started writing, like, and the writing process when it comes to my songs, like lyrically,
Right.
is it's a weird process, man.
Yeah.
It's so difficult to explain. You're basically sitting there
Right.
and you're listening to the backing track that you've
Mm-hmm.
made,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're just like like mumbling like
Syllable.
words that
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Syllable. Right.
It doesn't make any sense. You're just
Right.
hoping
Right.
to like find like a melody line or something. But
Oh, absolutely.
sometimes the
Hmm.
beautiful thing about that process is that sometimes you'll enter this weird state where you kind of zone out, and
Hmm.
you enter like you're able to like take some stuff from like the subconsciousness,
Right.
which is like
Absolutely.
if you ask me, that's where all the gold is. If you were able to
Oh,
like
absolutely.
to
Absolutely.
enter that part of the
Tap into that.
brain,
Yeah. Sort of tap into
ex-
that. Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
exactly, yeah. If you were
Absolutely.
able to tap into that like consistently,
Yeah.
you would be making hits like all the time,
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
feel like
Absolutely.
that's where the gold is. But like, so that's basically
Right.
what you're hoping to happen, that you get a line in there, something you can start off of,
Hmm.
and then you just, or at least I just go off of that.
Oh, absolutely. That's wonderful, bro. That's wonderful. Tell me about this. I mean, once that song was put out, like you said that you sort of were just playing around on the instrument, then you sort of put this together, you put the bass line and you did all those things, and then you sort of worked on lyrics, and then you put it out, then you saw potential in it, and then you further build on it. After putting it out, what was the whole sort of reaction to it, and how did it surprise you in certain aspects as to how people received it for you?
So I already kind of knew what to expect from like a release, because like I have already released music like a while back, but
Mm-hmm.
it was with the before mentioned close friend.
Right.
We
Right,
had like this project called Dojo.
Mhm.
So
right.
like I have tried putting out music like on Spotify and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
where you're you're hoping for the best, and the the uh when it's out, it's a you know it's a great feeling because you're done with the track or the album or what you're putting out.
Right.
um but it's also or at least back then it felt underwhelming, because perhaps your perception of like, or assumption, I guess is the word, about how things would turn out were just like not realistic.
Right,
um
absolutely.
so I'd say that this time around I kind of knew what to expect,
Hmm.
and then based off of that, I'd actually say that the reception of Amygdala has been actually kind of overwhelming, because there have been a lot of people from all over the world
Hmm.
who have like texted me that they're great fans, and
Wow.
that they put like my songs on their playlists and stuff, which
Right.
is like,
Count me that. Count me that. I also liked it so much. That was really good. Right.
Yeah,
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, man.
that's
Absolutely. I'm one of them. I'm one of them. But yes, man. So I mean that's wonderful, bro. I mean I'm sure that the scalability of sort of like the appreciation can't sort of be assessed, and I'm sure it has a compounding sort of effect to it where you just keep putting out stuff, and then there's like a snowball effect to it, and then eventually it does. But I'm sure that the fact that you're putting out songs and working towards it with all sincerity, that itself, I'm sure that itself is the reward. The larger reward is just doing work with sincerity. So that's great, man. That's great. Tell me about this. Speaking about like making Amygdala, I'm sure that that's the process for each song might differ in its own way, right? And like you were saying earlier, what is your general process of like writing a song? Like you said that in the duo uh, that you previously worked in, I'm sure it might be a little different because the roles and responsibilities are sort of divided. So,
right.
what is your whole process like, working solo and working in a duo, or working?
So
Yeah.
it's actually a really good question, because the process is actually quite different. When you're working by yourself, you basically get to determine however you want to do things. Like,
Oh, absolutely.
and for me, it really differs from time to time. But the usual thing that happens for me is that I have a chord progression
Hmm.
Mhm.
on like mostly the guitar, because that's the instrument I'm most comfortable with. Um, and then sometimes I'll start adding lyrics to that already, just to get like kind of the shape of the song down, like the structure.
Right.
And then maybe I'll record and then start producing it, adding more instruments, stuff like that. Other times it's where I kind of produce the entire song before adding lyrics to it, which was kind of what happened with Amygdala.
Right.
But like when you're working in a group, at least from my experience, you basically you show each other ideas that you have either created, from the past way back, or something that you came up with like last night. It's basically
Right.
just showing each other ideas for songs that you think has potential.
Absolutely.
And then if you're both kind of vibing with it and kind of like into it,
Right.
that's the song that you choose to like to work on together. And then you just for us it was like maybe there'd be like a chord progression on the piano, and I would kind of go home and then add some lyrics to that, and then I would send that to my friend, and then he would add some more instruments to it, and then it just kind of becomes like this back and forth where it's like the reason why it's so good, and the reason why I really think that working in that project called Dojo, the reason why I think that actually helped me grow as an artist is because suddenly you have someone to critique your songwriting before it's just
Right.
out there in the
Absolutely.
world,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I've
So-
been in a position because I was actually working as a screenwriter with a bunch of friends, and I've like worked in 2 or 3 different duos. And when what you're suggesting is rejected on base level, you realize that there's so much of delusion that can sort of be cut through before it sort of even builds on to become something. So
Exactly.
I think yeah, I mean it can sort of be, it's a double-edged sword where I feel that it can even harm you because you're always second guessing the outcome of what you're saying, and you want to always suggest something that will always be approved. So you're more outcome oriented rather than process oriented. But I get your point. Yeah, it definitely sort of has that. Yeah. So continue with what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah, like that's exactly like how it is. Like it feels nice because you know because the thing that I realized is that back when I started writing songs, and you don't have anything to like reference back to, you're basically just sitting there creating songs for the first time ever. You end up taking these shortcuts without probably realizing it, because you just or at least that's what happened to me. And then I wouldn't really think about it, or maybe I would be like, I'll get back to that and change it, and then it never really happened. So when you're working in like a group, that doesn't happen. Like you write something that's not good, the other person is going to be like, hey, we need to like take a look at that and rewrite it. Which is like, as you said, like, because sometimes you'll have written something and then you'll show it to the other part of your group, and maybe they'll be like, I don't know, and you'll be very enthusiastic about it.
Absolutely.
So that
Yeah, that sucks, man. I'm honestly because when you're not getting a definitive answer out of what you're trying to pitch, you are always confused about whether I should even be optimistic about this or whether I should accept the fact that this is never going to get accepted. And
exactly.
what I can feel about duos is that, I mean, as much as the critique and having a bounce board and being objective about work is important, I feel that sometimes just basing your opinion on one person's perception, that person's perception could differ because that person might be in some different sort of mood, or that person might not be able to completely understand what he's saying, and completely basing it on that can also be sort of a tricky sort of road that you're sort of navigating through. Largely, I think 90 to 95% of the times, if that collaborator understands and you guys, are vibing, then it's not an issue. But I think that 5% can also be very crucial, because you never know what that 5% is. It could just be one decision which could just sort of, change the
Very
whole
true.
course of the
I mean, I have a question to that. I mean, how important is it to find someone, if you're thinking about collaborating with people? How important is it to find someone who actually understands what you are trying to do? I
Right.
mean, because you can think that, okay, this is I mean, both can be pretty good artists, but there can be differences in approaching the song, or maybe even the techniques, and maybe even the technical part of things.
Absolutely.
So I mean, how important is it for you to think that, okay, this is someone I would like to collaborate with?
Yeah, that's a very good question, actually. So what happened with the old project was that it was basically, my close friend. So we didn't really think about whether or not we were actually, compatible, uh, musically.
Okay.
We just knew that we had like energy, and we, had a good connection. So I definitely say that when it comes to working together with another musician, I really value that personal connection. Like, am I able to talk to this person? Am I able to
Right.
like feel what they're putting down?
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
and yeah, but I definitely also say that, in the present moment, I'm definitely more aware of like what kind of music they're making. Because like generally speaking, I would be looking for someone that has a close kind of sound to what I'm making, just so that it kind of
Right.
makes sense.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
But I'm always open to also like to work on broader stuff, like, because the thing that I always think is super interesting in music is when you start mixing very different genres together. I think that's a super
Right.
interesting
Mhm.
aspect of the whole music creation business, but it it's a tough thing to like to handle, because like
Right.
there's always going to be a voice saying like you need consistency.
Right.
You can't create like music in all different kinds of genres.
Mhm.
You, in order to appeal to an audience, uh like you need to kind of specify what kind of music you're making,
True.
or at
Right.
least that's my perception of it.
So I think your perception is right,
Yeah.
because you're completely right about that, because like you said that you need to sort of vibe on a personal level with that person, because you're going to be interacting the most with them, probably more than your family also at times. So I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
important, it's sort of important that as individuals you sort of vibe, and there's that general regard and respect and sort of admiration and adulation for each other. It doesn't need to be sort of agreeing to everything that one has to say for the other. But I kind of do agree, because art is a reflection of who you are. So
Mhm.
if it can't be that those things are going to be completely separate or parallel to what you're doing, and that those lines are never going to intersect. They definitely are going to, because what decisions you're going to make in terms of like your whole process are also going to be reflective of the kind of person you are, right? Eventually. So I do agree on that. I do agree on that.
Yeah, for sure.
I completely agree with what Steven said, that you need, if there are two people collaborating, you need both of them to be able to talk to each other. And
Right.
I mean, of course, at a very intimate level is what I think you should be able
Sure.
to talk to. So
Sure.
yeah, I completely agree with that. Uh,
Absolutely.
Perfect. Yeah, that you have
Absolutely.
to vibe with whatever the other person is trying to.
Right.
But
Otherwise, it doesn't make sense actually. Yeah.
yeah,
It does make sense.
but it was actually a very important, or like interesting aspect that you brought up, which is like
Mhm.
when you have something, when you work in such a creative field as like music or like art in general, I guess, whatever you're creating, whatever you're selling is like a part of yourself,
Right.
like
Right.
it really like, however cheesy this may sound, it really does feel like you're taking a part of
Yeah.
yourself and you're like putting it out there
For
for
sure.
everyone
For
to
sure.
just like listen to.
Right.
So that's also like when you're working with someone, because that can be very vulnerable,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
it's a very vulnerable process. You're showing something to this other person, and you're being like, this is, something I created,
Hmm.
and you need to not be too connected to it, if
Oh
that
yeah.
makes sense,
For sure.
because
Yeah.
if they end up, critiquing it,
Hmm.
you have to not take that too much to heart, which can
Oh yeah.
actually be a quite challenging thing when it's something you're
Right.
very passionate about.
Right. 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 Absolutely. I think it's the term for that is aesthetic distance. I think that's a term which is used in theater as well, where you sort of the characters that you're sort of working towards, or the sort of things that you're sort of diverging into in terms of like the subject matter and all those things, you deliberately, for an objective point of view, not to get sucked into what the world of that particular story or that character is, maintain an aesthetic distance for your own sanity. Because I feel that it is important, right? Because if you just put all your chips emotionally into one sort of project, it is important to be. I mean, there's no harm in it, but I feel that eventually it can sort of drain you also. So it is always important that because any comment that doesn't sort of match the sort of bandwidth of how you're looking at it can mess with you and make you question everything, right? So I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
I mean, your own existence for the matter of fact. So I mean,
Yeah.
I agree with it. I think, yeah, it's important because, and I think those things can only be learned by practice, right? Where you're sort of like, I think freelancers are very thick-skinned that way, right? Is what they say, because they're always in the business of being rejected on a constant basis. So they know that whatever they're going to do, they need to have 10, 20, 30 alternatives, 40 alternatives for it to sort of, it's about them rather than the thing. So I think, yeah, it's important. It's important. And I think it's always largely if you have the right people around you telling you things, it's always the criticism is always constructive and it's always for the betterment of the project. So I think to be sort of perceptive to that, I think, like you said, it's important to sort of distance yourself in a way where you're not completely detached, but at the same time, you're not completely sort of sucked into what it is. So speaking about this, tell me what I really, Padme and I were also talking about this is that, this is an R&B track. Is this the genre that you sort of want to further continue with, or are there other genres like you were even talking about, like genres blending in and which could sort of be like a fusion or like sub genres sort of kicking in? What is your whole sort of approach with the music that you're trying to do? What kind of soundscape are you trying to sort of be identified with or that resonates with you?
Yeah. So I definitely feel that whatever I end up creating in the future, it's always gonna have a a heavy influence by R&B. Cause and I think the reason behind that is that whenever I sing something, I always kind of do it in the style of R&B, if that makes sense. Like
Right.
whenever
No,
I'm
absolutely.
yeah, whenever I'm singing something, I can't
Right.
help but like add these little riffs and runs, which automatically kind of gives it this small flavor of like R&B. But
Right.
something that I've been really interested in like adding to the whole mix of music is definitely jazz. I've begun to like to really dive deeply into like jazz theory, listening to a lot of like the old classics and some newer modern jazz components as well. And
Right.
it's and that kind of like also turns into like this neo soul-ish genre, because
Right.
that is basically like where you blend R&B and like a lot of jazz elements.
Huh.
So I when it comes to like and when it comes to sounds, like I've always been a huge geek, and like I've been playing video games for the entirety of my life basically.
Right. Right.
So if I'm able to somehow incorporate some kind of video game-ish sounds into my songs, that is always going to be a plus. Because
Oh wow.
I listen to a lot of artists where they kind of make that happen. A good exception, like a good example of this would be an artist called Umi. Um,
I'm sorry, what's the name?
Umi.
Okay. Okay.
So she has this really great R&B vibe, but all of her tracks are so well produced. And there are many of them where they have like small video game references here and there. And I just love that. I would love to incorporate that into my, mixing and producing process as well.
Right. 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 That's very interesting. I mean, speaking about like genres, are there sort of like instruments also that you sort of want to dabble into, where you see that you could possibly explore that and sort of it could lead to newer sounds that could already sort of like blend in with something that you're already doing, or sort of open doors to newer sort of possibilities in terms of the musicality that you possess.
Yeah. So um, the instruments I play for now, or up until now, I should say, is I play guitar. I play bass, but not like super well. It's just enough to get around, creating bass lines to my own tracks.
Right.
And then, I know how to add chords like on a piano because of like the music theory knowledge. So like I definitely want to spend some more time into like get like mastering these instruments more, because I really feel like, especially in my genre of music like R&B, neo soul, and jazz, the piano and the bass proportions of the song can be really, really like important.
Right.
And
Yeah,
I wanna master these instruments so that I can kind of like start to implement those sort of aspects instead of my songs, because I'm very wary of the fact that I'm not too guitar focused, with that being my main instrument. I don't want all my songs to like have a strong foundation of guitar.
Right.
I really do want to explore like a lot of instruments. And then, I don't know if it'll ever happen, but like I've always been in love with the tenor saxophone. Like,
Oh wow. Okay.
so if I could one day like implement that into my songs, I would be a happy individual as well.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Apart from the instruments, are there other skills? It could be vocals. It could be production. It could be, like the micro sort of aspect of the musician that you are, that you sort of want to better, or want to sort of improve, or want to sort of explore as well going forward as a musician.
Yeah, like basically every aspect, because like
Wow,
I'm
that's great. That's a very honest answer. I like that. Absolutely.
yeah, because like that's
Yeah.
kind of like the whole philosophy that
Yeah.
I'm going with
Constantly
like in my
evolving,
life.
constantly learning. Yeah, constantly growing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like constantly. If I ever get to the point where I'm like sitting there and I'm thinking, yeah, I got it. I don't think that's gonna happen. I think I'm always gonna have a new goal, something new to learn, something new to explore.
Right.
And I hope that that is gonna continue in like every single instrument that I'm playing, every single aspect of music creation, because I've still got so much to learn. Like when it comes to music production, it's a tough world to get into. Like you need
Sure.
it's basically like learning an entirely new language, because like you're introduced to this software
Right.
um where you need to create music and you have no idea what's going on, so you
Right.
start to do like what everyone else does and search up all these YouTube tutorials, and it can be a jungle. It's
Absolutely.
tough. And that's where I was lucky to have like my close friend who got into production way earlier than I did.
Right.
So I could, if I was ever like in doubt of anything, I could always go to him and like
Right.
ask him like,
Absolutely.
why does my vocal sound like it's trapped in like a small tube? Like what's going on? Um, so yeah, grateful for having so many talented friends close to me.
Wow, man. That's first of all, I appreciate your honesty, man. You're really upfront and not trying to mince words, which is such a such a such a good skill and good attribute to have as a person in general, not even a musician. So,
Thank you.
tell me about this. I mean, like we're talking about putting out music, working on music. You putting out music. You said that like amygdala also amygdala. I don't know how amygdala, right? That sort of
Yes.
got a response, which sort of exceeded your expectations, and uh, satiated you or made you happy in terms of what you were able to gauge out of it. Going forward, what's the kind of sort of audience that you want to target? What's the kind of audience that you preferably, ideally want to sort of tune in to listen to your music, or would like to further play to in terms of gigs, in terms of the catalog of the music that you're putting out? What is the ideal kind of sort of audience that you want to build for the music that you're
That-
working?
that's a good question, actually. I used to think a lot about that, I have to admit. I was very, when I first started making music, I was
Hmm.
very focused around like, who am I trying to like appeal to? Like what's my
Right.
audience here? And I think it isn't, an important thing to keep in mind when you're creating music, because that can
For sure.
really evolve your, statistics and like numbers and stuff.
Hmm.
Because if you know which audience you're appealing to, your
Hmm.
chances are you also know how you're gonna like grow that audience, how you're gonna like promote to that audience.
Hmm.
Um, but now I actually have to say that like I the I think that every musician's dream is that
Hmm.
when you show up for a concert, that you're able to see like everyone, like
For
every
sure.
kind of person, like the age group is like all the way from like 14 to like 70 years old, that would be amazing. And like you would see all different kinds of styles among the audience, because I feel like that's when you, or at least to me, that would feel like a huge success, because that means that I'm not excluding everyone, you know, and that everyone can like get into my style of music.
True. True.
The reality of the situation probably is that, at least at the start, I'm gonna be playing in like smoky jazz bars and stuff like that.
So,
Right.
while we are speaking about the audience you'd like to play to, tell us more about the gig scene in Denmark. What kind of scene is there in Denmark? Not right now. I mean, in general. Right now,
Oh yeah. Like obviously, right now the the live scene is empty.
Right.
But
right.
but yeah, like back when it was like active, the thing that's really popular in Denmark is, you know, most of the mainstream music that comes from like American radio stations.
Right.
But then there's definitely also been like a very strong love towards like EDM music. I
Right.
think like this sort of very grand music with like four on the floor and, you know, just party music basically.
What are the songs that you're sort of working towards now? I mean, what is the like we've spoken about like the audience you want to have. We've spoken about your songwriting process. We've spoken about the instruments that you want to sort of dabble into, the genres that sort of excite you. What is the kind of music the soundscape that you're sort of working towards now as of now?
So currently I'm working on actually like a song. It's basically like a reimagining of a song that I made in the group Dojo. I kind of got the idea from the artist I mentioned before, Umi, because she basically took like an entire record, like an album that she had already made, and then she called that the same album name, and then just like with the undertitle Reimagined, which I thought was really interesting because it gave it a completely new sound. And you could, I think it's a genius way to actually put out music a lot of times, because
Right.
you know, if you have it, like if you like her already have a pretty big fan base, you can, you know, the fans will be able to recognize the songs because they, you know, they'll recognize that they've heard like the lyrics or whatever element they've chose to keep there. But then like every other aspect is basically changed, which is super interesting to me. So I kind of wanted to try that out. And then like the plan going forward is just to drop consecutively, you know, a bunch of singles, in the hopes of like creating small attention towards me as an artist, as like a solo artist, gradually building up that audience, hopefully.
Absolutely. That's wonderful, man. That's wonderful. Speaking about all of that, who are the artists that you've sort of come across of lately that have like blown your mind in terms of like the music that they're doing? Could be from anywhere. Could be local. Could be international. Could be sort of people you've heard who are like from way back from the sort of time we live in also.
Yeah. So like a lot of the music that I listen to at the moment is from the artist called Her. I have like a sneaking suspicion that she is gonna be like one of the, like she's on her way to becoming like one of the greatest of all time. She's already won like countless of Grammys and like tons of like awards. And yeah, I just like, she is, the reason why I think she's so great is that, you know, she's a female artist, which, you know, a lot of people know that when it comes to like the music industry and like a lot of other industry, the representation of like the female gender is not always very present. And I think she does like an amazing job of like showing and kind of empowering, you know, how that is a thing. And hopefully that's going to create an entire new like generation of musicians, hopefully R&B inspired. That would make me very happy. And then a guy who's completely blown me away recently is this guy called Jacob Collier, I think.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he is like out of this world.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I've also heard a lot of his music. I really like it. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. That's great, man. That's great. Where do you sort of see yourself situated in the whole music scene of Denmark?
So I think like Denmark has kind of like, at least when it comes to the indie scene, it seems like it has it's like a revitalization of 80s music. 80s music seems to be making its way back. Not music from the 80s, but like new music with like heavy 80s inspiration. So obviously I'm not really in that ballpark. But I'm hoping to create in not so many months, I'll be moving to the capital of Denmark, which is Copenhagen, where I'm hoping to find an audience that is into R&B and more like the jazz side. I'm hoping like to be able to find the places to play there and like the people to play with,
Sure. Absolutely. How different a musician you are when you're on stage and when you're sort of working on your own music in solitude? How different are those personas? Is there like sort of like have they blended together as time has gone by, or you still feel there's like sort of a distinction between who you are on stage and who you are as a person who's working on his music and writing songs and working on all those things? What is
no,
like?
yeah. I think there's like still a very, very big difference between who I am on stage and who I am when I'm just working on music from home.
Right.
I try to generally be down to earth, try not to put on any kind of facade of any kind. But I also think that when you're on stage and you're getting ready for a performance, it does help to kind of distance yourself from the audience. But it's a weird meta game where it's like I still try to be myself, but I also take like kind of a third person perspective just so I don't let the nerves get the better of me, So I try to I generally speaking, try to lighten up the mood whenever I'm playing live. I've played in front of I've played live a lot of times. I haven't performed any of my original stuff as Stephen Brown yet, but I've been playing, live gigs, weddings, parties at like the high schools and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's actually kind of my favorite part of being a musician, I have to admit. Like I generally speaking, I really love the performance part of it. When it comes to like writing and producing and stuff, that can also be very fun, but the reward is so much more immediate when you're playing for people, because you can hear their excitement, you can hear whether or not they like it. So the reward is like, it's just so immediate, and the adrenaline kick that you kind of get out of like performing is great.
True. What's your favorite kind of gig that you sort of prefer doing a lot more in terms of frequency?
So I'd say that, playing at those revenues where it's not a gigantuan audience. Like I actually have to be quite honest and say, like, the dream that a lot of people have at playing like a sold out show at like a huge football stadium is not a dream of mine. I much prefer, not super close and intimate concerts, but the thing in between, where it's like there is definitely still like 200 to 400 people there, but they're not too far away. Like there's no need for like a big screen in order for the people at the back to see you. I'm hoping to like find those sort of revenues where that is possible.
So
wow, that's great.
I have a follow-up question to that. So I'm not sure what what sort of scene was there when the pandemic happened. But in India, what really happened was once we were not allowed to do, or rather, we should not be doing gigs. So that once that situation kicked in, there was this onset of online gigs, people doing gigs through Zoom. And was it same for in Denmark as well? And did you like what was your perspective with that? If
I actually, yeah, I actually think a very cool thing happened when the whole quarantine thing began. Obviously, it was a terrible thing to happen. But I've always kind of been like a glass half full kind of guy. And the thing that I for sure noticed was that when people were kind of forced to stay at home, um, people like musicians had to figure out a way to like still interact with their audience without having them go to physical concerts.
Right.
And the way that a lot of people chose to deal with that was that they make these, like they went live on different media platforms like Instagram, TikTok, or whatever you have.
Right.
And I actually felt like that was a bigger and more intimate interaction between like artist and audience than you could have if you went physically to their live concerts, because they would be sitting in their homes playing music intimately. Like there would be no, like, it felt so real to me. And I honestly, I love that. I love that so much. If I was able to do that in some sort of way, whenever I have like enough of a catalog, I would be open to do that for sure. Like just going live on some sort of media platform for my fans and play music for them. I feel like that's a really, really great way to interact with your audience.
Great, man. That's great. Yeah, absolutely. It's I could yeah, man. It takes courage to sort of be optimistic in times like these also, because sometimes whatever's happening around you can sort of get to you in terms of like is there even any point being optimistic for now? But yeah, man, the fact that you're looking at newer avenues is wonderful. Uh, so I mean, we're almost towards the end of our podcast, but we have this one sort of question which we call the corporate question, which only Pathway asks because he belongs to the corporate world. It's sort of like an interview question that we have. But yeah, man.
Okay.
Anyways, I mean, before Pathway does the question, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Stephen. And
Same to you.
So thank you for being so honest. And I mean, I wish the utmost prosperity for whatever you're doing and all the music that you're going to put out. So over to Pathway.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
So all right. So this is basically about what do we expect from Stephen Brown, the artist, in the coming few probably months or maybe year, whatever plan you have, basically.
Yeah,
Right.
So it's basically a corporate question, because in generally in corporate interviews people ask this question, right? How do you see yourself in 5 years?
yeah,
And,
very dismissive. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
but, yeah, but we don't want to do it like 5 years, because nobody knows what's going to happen in 5 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, what's your plans? I mean,
So yeah, my plans for the next year or so, or like the next coming months, is that I'll be releasing these singles that I spoke about earlier. I am constantly working on each song individually, and the plan is basically just to release the song whenever I'm done with it, basically.
Right.
So I'll produce a song, finish it, publish it, and obviously some time we're going to be spent promoting it as well.
Right.
But that's kind of like the snowball that I'm kind of trying to like get to roll into a big, huge lavine, hoping that just like one of the songs, apparently one of the big things is that if your songs gets put on like a big playlist that's like curated from Spotify's side,
right,
it's gonna get like a lot of plays and stuff. I'm hoping to some like just get some sort of recognition from, or like any sort of recognition, but mostly it's about creating music, being consistent with it, and that's what I plan to be. I plan to put out lots of singles, and maybe when I've got like 7 or 8 singles out, I'll put together like an album, and then like of the singles that I made and then add 3 or 4 more new songs.
That's
Great,
wonderful, man. That's wonderful. And I'm hoping that thing definitely will happen. I'm sure that,
Mm.
I mean, there's no sort of questioning the quality of the music that you're making. So it's just a matter of time. So I would just
Thank you.
urge you to just be consistent and, just keep putting it out there. Because I genuinely resonated with the music, and I felt that there's a lot of sincerity and there's a lot of freshness to what you're doing. So, I mean, just more
Thank
power to
you.
you. Keep it coming, keep them coming. And here's to seeing you do a lot of amazing work. And if you have a new single, please feel free to come back on the podcast, talk about it. And it was an absolute pleasure talking to you. So thank you so much, Stephen, for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. And guys, please go and follow Stephen from our side. Stephen, if you could just tell your Instagram ID to everybody.
Oh yeah, so you could go follow me on both Instagram and TikTok. It is both Stephen Brown _music.
Perfect. Please go and even stream Amygdala. We're going to be linking it in our description. So go and check out Amygdala by Stephen. It's a wonderful R&B song that he's worked on, and I'm sure you like it. Thank you so much, Stephen. If you guys have made it to this point, please go and follow us at soundshome.pod on Instagram. We put out a podcast every Friday on our YouTube channel and subsequently on audio streaming platforms, including Spotify and Apple Music / podcast. I don't know which one it goes on, and other audio streaming platforms as well. And you can also check out our website, which basically just redirects us to the YouTube channel. So there's nothing out there on the website as of now. But hopefully. And big shout out to Saurabh, who does our artwork. We don't do that in every episode, but you're doing a very good job, Saurabh. So big shout out to you. And thank you to Akshit as well for introducing us to the incredible musician that Stephen is. So thank you so much for joining us, Stephen. We'll see you around, and we'll see you guys in the next podcast. Cheers. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Care.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.